What if the confusion you're feeling right now is not a sign that something is wrong, but proof that God is repositioning you for what is next? What if the delays, the endings, the sudden changes are not losses, but divine signals that your next chapter has already begun? There are moments in life when everything feels unfamiliar. What once made sense no longer fits. Doors you depended on have closed, and paths you trusted seem to disappear. You may feel as though you are standing between what was and what you cannot yet see. But this in-between place is not accidental. It is not confusion. It is transition. God never turns a page without purpose. When He prepares a new chapter, He first stirs your spirit, unsettles your comfort, and stretches your faith. If you listen carefully in this season, you will hear God whispering direction, even in the silence. Stay with this message until the end, because what you are about to understand will change how you interpret your struggles, your waiting, and even your unanswered prayers. By the time this message settles into your heart, you will no longer fear change. You will recognize it as divine guidance. There are moments when God speaks before He shows, when He announces a new season, long before the evidence becomes visible. This is how God works with His people. He prepares the heart before He changes the surroundings. Long before a door opens, God stirs something deep within you. You begin to feel unsettled, not because something is wrong, but because something greater is approaching. The comfort you once enjoyed no longer satisfies your spirit. The routines that once brought peace now feel limiting. This is not confusion. This is divine preparation. God always gives an inner signal before an outer shift. When He is about to write a new chapter, He first gives you a sense that the old chapter has finished its assignment. Throughout Scripture and life, God never moves His people without first speaking to them inwardly. He plants a vision, a stirring, a quiet conviction that says, there is more. Even when circumstances look unchanged, God has already released a word in the spiritual realm. Many people miss their next chapter because they are waiting for external confirmation while ignoring the internal prompting. But faith is trained to recognize God's voice before seeing God's hand. When God speaks, the natural world may remain silent for a season, yet heaven has already set things in motion. This is why waiting seasons feel intense. You are carrying a word without yet holding the result. You feel expectation mixed with uncertainty. Your spirit senses movement, but your eyes see delay. God allows this tension because it stretches faith and deepens dependence. If God revealed everything at once, you would rely on sight instead of trust. The unseen announcement of a new chapter trains your heart to walk with God, not ahead of Him and not behind Him. The announcement is not always loud. Sometimes it is a gentle unease. Sometimes a repeated thought you cannot shake. Sometimes a desire that refuses to die. When God announces a new chapter, He often allows dissatisfaction with what once worked. This does not mean the past was wrong. It simply means it has fulfilled its purpose. God is a God of seasons, and every season has an ending. Trees do not bear the same fruit all year, and people are not meant to remain in the same spiritual place forever. Growth demands movement. God does not call you forward to harm you, but to mature you. What feels like restlessness is actually readiness. God is preparing you to step into something that requires a new mindset, a stronger faith, and deeper obedience. Many people resist this announcement because it feels uncomfortable. The unknown feels risky. Familiarity feels safe. But safety is not the same as obedience. God never promised comfort. He promised presence. When God announces a new chapter, He asks you to trust His character even when you do not understand His timing. Faith does not demand answers. It responds to direction. The inner prompting you feel is God inviting you to move closer to His will. Ignoring it only prolongs frustration. Aligning with it releases peace, even before clarity arrives. The announcement of a new chapter also exposes attachments. God reveals what you are holding on to that cannot go with you. Old patterns, old fears, old dependencies begin to surface. This is not condemnation, it is preparation. God cannot build the future on foundations that belong to the past. When He speaks about what is next, He also highlights what must be released. This is why obedience often feels costly at first. Letting go is painful, but holding on is heavier. God announces change so that your heart can gradually loosen its grip before your feet ever move. Often, God announces a new chapter through disruption. Plans change unexpectedly. Opportunities shift. Relationships realign. What once flowed easily begins to resist. These disruptions are not random. They are divine signals redirecting your attention. God is too loving to leave you comfortable in a place that can no longer support your calling. The resistance you feel is not opposition, it is redirection. God closes certain paths so you will seek Him instead of settling for convenience. When God announces a new chapter, He also increases spiritual sensitivity. You become more aware of His voice, more responsive to correction, more hungry for truth. The old appetite no longer satisfies. This hunger is evidence that God is drawing you closer to Himself before releasing new assignments. God always prioritizes intimacy before activity. He wants your heart before your hands. The announcement of a new chapter is an invitation to deeper relationship, not just greater results. Some people mistake this season for delay, but delay is often development. God uses time to align you with the promise. What He has prepared must match who you are becoming. If the blessing arrives before the character is ready, it becomes a burden instead of a breakthrough. God announces first so that growth can occur in the unseen. Roots must deepen before branches expand. The silence you feel is not abandonment, it is cultivation. When God announces a new chapter, doubt often tries to speak louder. Questions arise. What if I miss it? What if I fail? What if I am wrong? But God does not announce a new chapter to confuse you. He announces it to invite your trust. Fear asks what could go wrong. Faith asks who is leading. As long as God is leading, the destination is secure, even if the route is unfamiliar. You are not required to understand everything. You are required to follow faithfully. This announcement also calls for patience. God does not rush His process. What He builds slowly lasts longer. The waiting is not wasted, it is working. Every prayer you pray, every moment of obedience, every step taken without certainty is shaping the foundation of what is coming. God announces the new chapter early so that hope can sustain you during the process. Hope anchors the soul when circumstances are unstable. If you are feeling this inner stirring right now, it means God is already speaking. The fact that you sense change means heaven has already released instruction. You are not late. You are not forgotten. You are not stuck. You are standing at the threshold of something God has already prepared in the spiritual realm. The announcement has been made. The invitation has been given. The question is not whether God is leading, but whether you will trust Him enough to respond while the chapter is still being written, while the evidence is still forming, while the promise is still unfolding in ways your natural eyes cannot yet see. Transition is one of the clearest signs that God is actively working in a person's life. When everything begins to shift, when familiar structures no longer hold the same meaning, it is not chaos, it is construction. God rearranges before He reveals. He shifts before He settles. Many people misunderstand transition because they only see what is being removed, not what is being prepared. But God never dismantles without design. Every change you are experiencing is evidence that God is reorganizing your life according to a higher order, one that your present understanding may not yet grasp. When God rearranges a life, He often starts by loosening what once felt secure. This can feel unsettling, even painful, because humans naturally cling to what is known. Yet God sees beyond the present moment. He knows what will sustain your future, not just what comforts your present. Transition is God's way of creating room. What feels like loss is often space being cleared. You cannot carry new wine in old containers. God removes certain structures not because they were bad, but because they are no longer sufficient for what He intends to pour into your life. Increase does not begin with addition, it begins with alignment. Before God adds new responsibilities, new influence, or new blessings, He aligns your life with His will. Alignment often requires rearrangement. Things shift in priority, relationships are repositioned, desires are refined. What once mattered deeply may begin to fade, while new burdens and passions rise within you. This is not confusion, it is calibration. God is adjusting your focus so that when increase comes, it will not distract you or destroy you. Transition can feel like instability, but spiritually, it is precision. God knows exactly what He is doing. He allows uncertainty so that you learn to depend on Him rather than structure. When everything is predictable, faith becomes passive. But when things shift, faith becomes active. You begin to pray differently. You listen more carefully. You seek God not just for answers, but for direction. This heightened dependence is not weakness. It is strength being developed. God is training your spirit to move with Him instead of resisting Him. Many people resist transition because they associate it with failure. They assume that change means something went wrong, but often change means something went right and has now reached its limit. God does not keep you in environments that can no longer stretch your faith. He moves you because He is committed to your growth. Increase requires capacity, and capacity is built through challenge. The pressure you feel is not meant to crush you. It is meant to expand you. When God rearranges your life, He also rearranges your expectations. You begin to realize that what you once asked for is too small for what God wants to give. Your prayers evolve. Your faith matures. You stop asking God to bless what is comfortable and start asking Him to lead you where He desires. This shift is powerful because it moves you from control to surrender. Surrender is the doorway to increase. God entrusts more to those who trust Him more. Transition exposes hidden strengths. You discover resilience you did not know you had. You learn patience you never practiced before. You develop discernment that only comes through uncertainty. These qualities are necessary for the next level God is preparing. If God gave you the increase without the transition, you would not have the endurance to sustain it. The rearrangement is not punishment, it is preparation. God often uses transition to separate you from dependencies that limit your faith. You may realize that you relied too heavily on certain people, systems, or routines. When those supports shift, you are forced to lean more fully on God. This is not abandonment, it is intimacy. God wants to be your primary source, not your last resort. Transition strips away false security so that true security can be established. During this rearranging season, it may feel like progress has slowed, but spiritual progress is not always visible. While nothing seems to be moving on the outside, God is doing deep work on the inside. He is strengthening your character, refining your motives, and aligning your heart with His timing. Increase that arrives before this work is complete often leads to stress rather than joy. God is intentional with timing because He is protective of your destiny. Transition also teaches obedience without full understanding. God rarely explains every detail of His plan. He reveals just enough for the next step. This keeps you close to Him. If you could see the entire path, you might rely on the plan instead of the planner. God values relationship over revelation. The rearrangement of your life is designed to keep you walking with Him daily, not rushing ahead independently. As God rearranges, He also protects. He closes doors that would distract you. He delays opportunities that would arrive too early. He redirects paths that would lead to exhaustion instead of fulfillment. What feels like a setback is often a safeguard. God sees outcomes you cannot see. His no is as loving as His yes. Transition teaches you to trust His wisdom even when His decisions challenge your desires. Increase is never just about external blessing. It is about internal readiness. God measures increase differently than people do. He looks at faithfulness, humility, and obedience. Transition develops these qualities. When you remain faithful in uncertainty, you demonstrate trust. When you stay humble during change, you demonstrate maturity. When you obey without clarity, you demonstrate faith. These are the traits God rewards with lasting increase. If everything in your life feels like it is being rearranged, it is because God is actively involved. He has not stepped away, He has stepped in. The shifting is intentional. The movement is purposeful. Nothing is random. Even the discomfort has meaning. God is aligning you with a future that requires a new structure, a deeper faith, and a stronger foundation. The rearrangement you're experiencing is not the end of something good. It is the beginning of something greater, unfolding step by step under the careful direction of a God who never wastes a season and never mismanages a life that is surrendered to Him. When God leads into a new chapter, the first and most profound change happens within you. Before circumstances transform, before doors visibly open, God begins reshaping the inner life. This is why change often feels personal and intense. God is not only guiding you to a new place, He is forming you into a new person. The journey forward requires more than movement. It requires transformation. God never upgrades your surroundings without first enlarging your spirit. If you sense that you are no longer the same person you were before, it is because God is already at work deep within your heart. As God leads, old reactions begin to lose their power. Things that once triggered fear, insecurity, or impatience no longer have the same control. This is not accidental. God is teaching you how to respond from faith rather than emotion. A new chapter demands a new response system. You cannot carry yesterday's fears into tomorrow's assignment. God strengthens your inner stability so that external changes do not shake your confidence. The peace developing inside you is evidence that God is anchoring you more firmly in Him than ever before. God's leading also sharpens your discernment. You begin to see more clearly what aligns with His purpose and what does not. Choices that once felt complicated now feel clearer. This clarity is not intellectual, it is spiritual. God trains your spirit to recognize His voice amid noise and distraction. As He leads, your sensitivity to His guidance increases. You become more aware of when to move, when to wait, and when to let go. This awareness is crucial because the next chapter requires wisdom, not just enthusiasm. As everything changes, God works on your confidence, not confidence in self, but confidence in His presence. You realize that your security does not come from predictability, but from God's faithfulness. When He leads you into unfamiliar territory, He teaches you to trust Him more deeply. Each step taken without full certainty builds courage. Fear gradually gives way to assurance, not because the path becomes easier, but because your trust becomes stronger. God does not remove every obstacle. He increases your faith to walk through them. Transformation under God's leadership also affects how you view setbacks. What once felt like failure now feels like feedback. You stop seeing obstacles as signs to quit and start seeing them as moments to lean in. God reshapes your perspective so that you interpret difficulty through faith rather than frustration. This shift changes everything. When your mindset changes, your endurance increases. You no longer measure progress by speed, but by obedience. God also reshapes your desires. Ambitions that were driven by comparison or pressure begin to fade. In their place grows a desire to please God above all else. This internal realignment is powerful because it frees you from striving. You no longer chase validation, you walk in obedience. God leads you into contentment even before fulfillment arrives. This contentment is not passivity, it is trust. It allows you to move forward without anxiety, knowing that God's timing is perfect. As God leads, your prayer life deepens. You stop praying only for outcomes and start praying for alignment. Your conversations with God become more honest, more dependent, more relational. You listen as much as you speak. Prayer becomes less about control and more about connection. This deeper communion strengthens your confidence in His guidance. When God speaks, you recognize His voice because you have learned to linger in His presence. God's leading also develops patience. In a world that values speed, God values depth. He teaches you to wait without worry, to trust without timelines. Waiting no longer feels like punishment, but like partnership. You understand that God is working even when nothing seems to be happening. This patience protects you from rushing into things prematurely. God's blessings are best enjoyed when they arrive at the right time, not just the earliest time. As transformation continues, your capacity increases. You are able to carry more responsibility without becoming overwhelmed. You handle pressure with greater grace. Challenges that once drained you now strengthen you. God builds spiritual endurance so that you can sustain what He is about to release. Increase without endurance leads to burnout, but increase with endurance leads to fruitfulness. God prepares you for longevity, not just moments of success. God's leading also refines your humility. You become aware that every step forward is by His grace. Pride has no place in a heart that recognizes divine guidance. Humility keeps you teachable, it keeps you dependent, it keeps you aligned. God entrusts greater influence to those who remain grounded. As you change, your awareness of God's role in your life deepens, and gratitude becomes a natural response. As everything changes, even your understanding of identity shifts. You stop defining yourself by roles, achievements, or seasons. You root your identity in being led by God. This identity is unshakable. When circumstances fluctuate, your sense of self remains stable. You know who you are because you know who is leading you. This assurance gives you freedom to step into new territory without fear of losing yourself. God's leading ultimately produces peace that does not depend on outcomes. You may not know all the details of the future, but you know who holds it. This knowledge settles your spirit. Anxiety loses its grip. Doubt quiets. Faith rises naturally. The transformation within you becomes visible through calmness, confidence, and quiet strength. People may notice the change before you fully understand it yourself. When God leads, everything changes because you change. Your faith deepens, your vision sharpens, your heart strengthens. The transformation you experience is not temporary, it is foundational. God is not preparing you for one moment, but for an ongoing journey. The change within you is evidence that you are stepping into alignment with God's purpose, walking forward with a heart that trusts, a spirit that listens, and a life that moves in rhythm with His divine direction as the next chapter continues to unfold through obedience, faith, and an ever-deepening reliance on the God who leads with wisdom, love, and perfect timing.